العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Welcome to the second session on the topic, the Husayni paradigm of justice. May Allah reward you and thank you for attending at night time on a weekday. I just want to start off by recapping some of the lessons that we took from the last session. Those of you, inshallah, most of you guys were there for the last session. We went through the background before the tragedy of Karbala of what had happened in the Muslim society and the problems that the Muslim society was faced with. And then we spoke a little bit about Imam Hussain alayhi salam's activities to prepare the grounds for an uprising prior to the death of Yazid, so during the life of Muawiyah. So one of the very important lessons that we need to take from that class that we had last week, and one of the very important lessons with which we should look in this light, we should look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, is that all of the Imams were like one individual. This is obvious if we believe in Ismat and we believe that they have infallibility, they do exactly what Allah wants them to do, then it doesn't make a difference if there is Imam Ali alayhi salam or Imam Hassan alayhi salam or Imam Hussain alayhi salam, any one of the Imams, their goal for society and their actions that they are taking out to move the Muslim community forward are not going to be different from one to the other. It's as if, as you can see in this clip art that I've put on the slide, it's as if one of them, when he passes away, he passes the baton as if they're runners on a race. He passes the baton on to the next runner, and the next one continues down the same path that his predecessor was moving towards. If we look in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, we see this very clearly, that although they did different things, those differences were the result of the time and the society that they lived in. Otherwise, from one Imam to the other, the goal was the same goal, and at times when the circumstances were similar, they did the same thing. If we want to look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in this angle of their social political activities that they were carrying out, as some of our ulama have done, we can divide the period of 250 years from the time of the death of the Holy Prophet, about 10 AH, up until 11 AH, I think, up until the Ghaibat Sughra started. It's about 250-year period. We can divide it into 4 different periods of time that I put on these slides. First, we have the time where Imam Ali alayhi salam was in silence and almost cooperating with the first few caliphs because of that delicate situation that he was in. Last week we had quoted something from Nahj al-Balagha where he said, when they came to give him allegiance to become the caliph, initially he said, no, you don't want me as your khalifa. It's better that I stay as a wazir. That kind of indicates that that's what he was prior to becoming a caliph. He was trying to help the situation, although his right had been usurped from him, and although the Muslim Ummah was suffering as a result of him not being in power, the only thing that he could do was to kind of help the situation from getting worse and be a helper behind the scenes. So that was one period of the Imamah, one period of how our Imams interacted with the illegitimate government at their time. Okay? Then we have the period, for the very short period of about 5 years, where Imam Ali and then subsequently Imam Hassan alayhim salam were in power. So they led the Muslim Ummah with strength, with dignity, with a lot of bravery, but of course faced with a lot of problems and a lot of treason and a lot of difficulties, wars after wars. Finally, Imam Hassan alayhi salam was forced to abdicate and to sign that peace treaty with Muawiyah that we indicated a little bit last week about some of the wisdom behind that. So that finishes the second period of Imama in this division that we have done, or some of our ulama have done, not me. And then the third period, which is what we want to talk about in this session and what we spoke a little bit about last week, is the period of Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussain that culminated in the tragedy of Ashura. In this period, the Imams were planning for the short term. Their goal was very short term. They were seeing that the situation is ripe. Inshallah, very soon we can take back the leadership for ourselves, establish a true Islamic government, and get rid of the Bani Umayyah. And so it's in this context of the planning of a short-term uprising that we will look at some of the other statements today from Imam al-Hussein, statements that are there in the Maqtal and statements that at times you may have heard from Muharram Majalis. Of course, after the tragedy of Karbala, and especially after the Banu al-Abbas came into power, the strategy of the Imams had to change, and they were then planning for the long term. We see that very clearly they were growing the Shia community, they were exposing the injustices of the Khulafa, they were making their forces strong, but there was no, especially after the Banu Abbas came into power, after the 6th, 7th Imam, there was no short term plan. They were not planning an uprising in the short term because they knew the circumstances did not allow them to. So it was more working for the long term. And again, alhamdulillah, in those previous sessions we had with the Academy over this last year, we talked a little bit about that. But again, today, inshallah, our goal is to go through some of the statements of Imam Hussein to see what he was aiming towards when he refused to do bay'ah to Yazid and when he started his uprising. One thing I just want to say a little bit about the sources that I'm using before we go into these statements. Three of the very, very important and very authentic sources for the tragedy of Karbala are Irshad of Sheikh al-Mufid from the 5th century. He died in the 5th century. Tarikh al-Tabari, I'm not sure what century, but very early on, maybe 4th, 5th, 6th century, something like that, a Sunni source. And Luhuf of Sayyid ibn Tawus from the 7th century. All of these are very, very authentic and very strong sources, and all but one of the narrations that I'm about to mention are from these three books. One of the narrations is not in these three books, but even that is a narration that's there from very early centuries, and it's in another book of history, and generally our ulama accept it. So the ahadith that we're going to be reading today from Imam Hussein alayhi salam are generally from very strong and authentic sources of history. I just want to make sure again that my voice is clear, and if there's no questions from you guys, inshallah, we will start with today's goal of looking at some of these statements of Imam Hussein. Okay. So, as we spoke about last week, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhim salam, they were preparing the grounds for an uprising by exposing the injustices of Muawiyah, by rebuking the Muslims who are being quiet in the face of the crimes of Muawiyah. And then in the year 60 AH, in the month of Rajab, Muawiyah dies. And this is a story that I'm sure you have all heard on the Mimbar in the month of Muharram about how Yazid, when he comes into power, he sends a message to his cousin, or his uncle rather, Walid, who is the governor in Medina. And Walid, along with the help of another person from the Bani Umayyah, Marwan bin Hakam, they call Imam Hussein alayhi salam and they tell him he has to give bay'ah. This basically presents Imam Hussein alayhi salam with an opportunity to begin his uprising that he was planning for. The circumstances are ripe, they are right. People are, the minds and hearts of many of the Muslims, as we will see in some of the things that we're going to come to, the minds and the hearts of the Muslims are ready. People are ready for an uprising. People will support, it seems that people will support Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And Yazid, as we see in this hadith before us, was an open sinner and somebody who the Muslims were not happy with having as a leader. So it was a good opportunity which Imam Hussein grabbed to begin his uprising. He tells I think he tells Marwan in this hadith, that in this conversation that happens between him and Marwan, that he will never give allegiance to Yazid. He says, "Inna ahlu bayt al-nubuwa wa ma'adin al-risala wa mukhtalaf al-malaika." We are the family of prophethood, the treasure trove of risala. The messenger came from us. We are the place where the angels come to. Allah fataha bina fataha Allah bina khatam. Allah started, initiated. What does that mean? Has to be explained, I'm not sure, but Allah initiated through us, Allah ended through us. This is who we are. On the other hand, Yazid is a fasiq, a sinner, somebody who drinks alcohol, somebody who kills innocent people, who openly commits sin. And then, وَمِثْلِ لَا يُبَايِعُ مِثْلَ that somebody like me will not pledge allegiance to somebody like him. So basically, Imam Hussein alayhi salam starts this uprising. He takes this open stance against the government that he hadn't done, and that later Imams will not do because the circumstances do not allow them to. As he is leaving the city of Medina at the night time, he leaves a will with his brother. Incidentally, this is the one hadith that I said is not in those three very strong, authentic sources of Luhuf, Irshad, and Tabari. By the way, all these sources, these three important sources, are available in English as well. But anyways, this is still something that our ulama accept, and it's in early sources of history as well, where Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he leaves a will and testament. He calls for like a pen and he writes this will out with his own hands. He leaves it with his brother Muhammad al-Hanafiya. It's as if he is answering questions that might arise in the minds of people that, oh Imam Hussein, what caused you to begin this uprising, to stand up against Yazid? What was your goal? I put this clip art of some man teaching Quran. People might say, Imam Hussein, you could have stayed in Medina, you could have been a teacher of Quran, a teacher of akhlaq. Nobody would have had any problem with you. You would have been left alone if you didn't resist. You could have done allegiance and just sat down and been able to do some good. So Imam Hussein, as if he is answering these questions that might arise in the minds of people, he writes in this will, and these are famous lines, I'm sure you've all heard, وَإِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجْ أَشِرًا وَلَا بَطِرًا. Those of you who are familiar with a bit of Arabic, you should know that khuruj here, lam akhruj, it doesn't just mean that, oh, I didn't leave. Kharaja normally has that meaning of leaving. I didn't leave the city of Medina ashiran wala batira. No, khuruj is a term that is used in this context very clearly for an uprising. Kharaja means to launch an uprising. Kharaja bis sayf, for example. إِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجْ أَشِرًا وَلَا بَطِرًا. I didn't do it in a wild and reckless manner. وَلَا مُفْسِدًا وَلَا ظَالِمًا. Not to do fasad, cause mischief, nor to do oppression. What was your reason, O Imam Hussein? إِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي. To bring about reform, to rectify this bad situation where we have an illegitimate government and a leader who is not supposed to be the leader of the Muslim Ummah. This is a fundamental problem that is causing all kinds of secondary problems that we had discussed last week. So he's clearly saying that I'm following in the footsteps of my grandfather and my father, Imam Ali alayhi salam. He's explaining what his goal was. Another very interesting and very telling incident that happened at that time. So when Imam Hussein alayhi salam leaves Medina, as you all know, he goes to the city of Mecca. And in the city of Mecca, one by one, tens by tens, hundreds by hundreds of letters come to him from the people of Kufa, calling him to come to the city of Kufa, calling him to launch an uprising, because they hear wind. The Shia of Kufa, they hear news that Imam Hussein alayhi salam has refused to do bay'ah to Muawiyah, to Yazid. And that fills them with excitement and encouragement, and they call him that, okay, you're standing up against Yazid, come here, we will help you, we will fight for you. So this letter is a letter from very, very important and eminent Shia, people who I'm sure you've heard of: Zuhair bin Qayn, Hani bin Urwa, Sulaiman bin Surad. Zuhair bin Qayn and Hani we hear about normally in the Maqtal and in the story of Karbala. Sulaiman, maybe you haven't heard of, he was one of the very important leaders of the Shia community, but he was not with Imam Hussein in Karbala. Instead, he was from amongst those people who are known as the Tawwabin, who died later on after Karbala, trying to seek repentance for not being with Imam Hussein. Anyways, these are important Shias who we can say because of their lofty status, they understand to a certain extent what the goal of the Imam is, what the goal of the Ahlul Bayt is. And look at the language with which they are talking to Imam Hussein. Look what they are calling him to do. First of all, they are referring to the death of Muawiyah. They say, "Praise be to Allah who has destroyed your obstinate enemy, the one who had jumped upon this ummah and snatched the affairs of this ummah into his hands and usurped the war booty." This was something that from the time of, for example, Uthman bin Affan, the third caliph, the war booty, which was a huge source of income for the Muslims, tons of money from conquering lands like Iran and Africa, tons of money had poured into the Muslim Ummah, but from the time of the third caliph, it was being used in the hands of the Banu Umayyah and was being very unfairly distributed. We had spoken a little bit about this last week. So these Shias are talking about these sins of Muawiyah, that he did usurp the war booty and seized control of them, seized control of the Muslim Ummah, that means, without their consent. He killed the virtuous, he spared the wicked ones, and he made the wealth of Allah dulatan, rotating just amongst these few tyrants and wealthy people. So we can see the social injustices being highlighted by these Shia. So woe upon him, بُعْدًا لَهُ كَمَا بَعِدَتْ ثَمُودُ. Woe upon him the same way that there was the people of Thamud were destroyed, the people of Nabi Salih alayhi salam. Woe be upon him in that same way. And then the Shias, they say the following, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ عَلَيْنَا إِمَامٌ فَأَقْبِلْ. We have no Imam over us, so come. Interestingly enough, I looked at the English translation of this letter in the book Nafas al-Mahmum, that is one of the very important contemporary books of Maqtal of Imam Hussain. It's on alislam.org. There they had translated it as, "We have no Imam left," and then in brackets, "except for you." Okay, but the Arabic doesn't seem to say exactly that. It says, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ عَلَيْنَا إِمَامٌ. It says that we don't have any Imam over us. You see, Imam in that time didn't have the connotations that we Shia understand the word Imam as. Imam in that terminology, in that time, Imam simply meant an Islamic leader, a hakim, a governor. So they're saying, "Oh Imam Hussein, we don't have a leader. Come here and you can be our leader." And then they go on to say that this person who Yazid and Muawiyah have appointed, Nu'man bin Bashir, we don't even want him. We don't pray with him. If you come, we will get rid of him. We'll send him back to Syria. So this shows how everybody saw Imam Hussein's uprising at that time as a political uprising, something where he was starting a movement to establish an Islamic government. This is how it was understood and rightly understood. Let us look at one more letter and then I'll take a break and then we'll come back to some more statements of Imam Hussein. So when Imam Hussein alayhi salam then, in response to all of these letters that he receives when he is in the city of Mecca, as you all know, he sends his cousin Muslim bin Aqil, he sends him to Kufa with again a letter. Okay, he writes in this letter to the Shia of Kufa that I have got all your letters and now I'm sending my cousin Muslim. And then at the end of that letter that he writes, he says something again very, very interesting. He says, فَلَعَمْرِي مَا الْإِمَامِ إِلَّا الْحَاكِمْ بِالْكِتَابِ الْقَائِمْ بِالْقِسْطِ الدَّائِمْ بِدِينِ الْحَقِّ. He says that by Allah, don't doubt. What is he saying? He's saying, don't doubt that I also want to establish an Islamic government. I also want to get rid of Yazid and lead you Shia. He says, I swear by my life, an Imam. Again, Imam means what? Imam means like an Islamic leader, a true Islamic leader. It doesn't mean necessarily the way we think of it today. He says, فَلَعَمْرِي مَا I swear by my life, an Imam is only somebody who governs by the Kitab, by the Quran. Somebody who stands up for justice, establishes justice. Ad-da'in, somebody who takes his religion to be the deen al-haq, the true religion. Al-habis nafsahu ala dhalika lillah. Somebody who exclusively dedicates himself for the sake of Allah in this way. And then wassalam, Khudafis, basically. This is the end of his letter that he's writing to the Shia of Kufa. So these were some of the statements. Let me take a break and just narrate a story here. I'll lighten the atmosphere a bit and also give us an idea of the importance of the tragedy of Karbala. One of the goals of this class, inshallah, is to somehow prepare our hearts and our minds for the month of Muharram that is coming up. And let us think about lessons, in particular, this main lesson that we are focusing on. Think about lessons that we can take from the tragedy of Karbala. So I'll just give you a story here that during the time of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, again, the Shia community was under a lot of oppression. There was a lot of difficulty. This was, you can say, a little bit after the peak of the power of the Banu Umayyah. So the peak of the power of the Banu Umayyah, maybe we can say, is the fourth Imam's time. And then afterwards, during the fifth Imam's time, the Banu Umayyah were still very strong, but they were getting weaker and weaker. And then by the time of the sixth Imam, they were very weak, and then they were overthrown by the Banu Abbas. But still, they were very powerful during the time of the fifth Imam, and the Shias were under a lot of oppression. They couldn't openly express their love of the Ahlul Bayt and their Shiaism. It was very dangerous for them. At that time, there was a very, very important poet, somebody who, under a lot of danger to himself, he openly wrote poetry. And poetry was the media of that day. It spread across the Muslim world. This poetry strongly condemning the Banu Umayyah and strongly supporting the Ahlul Bayt. It was a media tool in support of the Imams that was very powerful, very effective, and very much appreciated by the Imams in the Banu Hashim. So let me just narrate this story to you, and inshallah we can take a nice, beautiful lesson about the importance of remembering the tragedy of Karbala and the power of the message of Imam Hussain. So in one of his poems that he wrote, it's a very important series of poems called Al-Hashimiyat. It's poems by Kumayt. Kumayt, by the way, is like he's somebody, when we study Arabic grammar in the Hausa, even non-Shia at time, they will quote Kumayt to show, like, prove like a point in Arabic grammar. Like, his Arabic was so beautiful, and he's from those early days of Islam where the Arabic was still very pure, and at that time the Arabic is used as when we want to derive rules in Arabic grammar, we use that early poetry from before Islam or from those early decades of Islam, such as the poetry of Kumayt. Anyways, that's a side point. So he wrote this poem called Al-Hashimiyat. First he went to Basra and he showed it to Farazdaq. Farazdaq praised him so much and praised the poem and told him to spread this poem. Then he comes to Medina, and before Imam Baqir alayhi salam, he recites this poem. And he reaches a line that is to do with Imam al-Hussein, this line that is before you. وَقَتِيلٌ بِالطَّفِّ غُودِرَ مِنْهُ بَيْنَ غَوْغَاءِ أُمَّةٍ وَطَغَامِ. That is talking about Imam Hussein, that Imam Hussein is the one that was killed in the land of At-Taf, Karbala. He was left alone amongst these evil people, these ghawgha, people who cause fitna, agitators. And Tagham, I didn't translate it. Tagham is again like a group of evil people. At this time, Imam Baqir starts to cry and he addresses Kumayt. He says, "Oh Kumayt, if I had any money, I would have given it to you as a gift. But it suffices for me to tell you this sentence that the Holy Prophet ﷺ told his poet Hassan bin Thabit. This is the line before you. لا زلت مؤيدا بروح القدس ما ما ذبيت عنا أهل البيت. It's not, yeah, ما ذبيت عنا أهل البيت. As long as you defend us, the Ahlul Bayt, you will always be supported by the Ruh al-Qudus. At this time, Kumayt, ضببت, perhaps, yeah, أحسن. This so, yeah, okay, ضببت, أحسن. Anyways, at this point, Kumayt, he goes to another one of the Banu Hashim, one of the grandsons of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, Abdullah bin al-Hassan bin al-Hassan. He was an important individual. Anyways, he goes to Abdullah bin Hassan and he recites the poem to him. And Abdullah tells him that I want to gift you a piece of land, an estate of land that is worth 4,000 dirham, 4,000 silver coins. I want to give it to you as a gift for this poem. You see how much the Banu Hashim appreciated that Humayt was reciting this poetry at this difficult time. And so Kumayt resists. He says, "No, no, by Allah, I swear by my mother, may my mother and father be sacrificed for you. When I recited this poetry, I didn't do it for anybody other than the sake of Allah. I don't want this gift from you." But Abdullah insists a lot, and eventually Kumayt takes the title to this piece of land. A few days later, Kumayt comes back to Abdullah and he says that, "Oh Abdullah, I have a hajat for you. I have a desire, something that I want you to do for me." Abdullah says, "Anything, Kumayt, anything you say, it's going to be fulfilled." And he says, "Please take this back, take this land back that you gave me. I don't want it." And Abdullah eventually agrees. At this time, another one of the Banu Hashim overhears what happened, one of the grandchildren of Abdullah bin Ja'far al-Tayyar. So what does Abdullah, this grandson of Abdullah bin Ja'far, do? He takes a piece of cloth, like a garment of leather, and he takes four children from the Banu Hashim. Each of them holds one corner of this piece of cloth, and they go around knocking on the doors of the Banu Hashim in Medina, and they say, this is Kumayt, who has been supporting us, the Banu Hashim, at a time when everybody has left us alone. Please give whatever you want, whatever you can give it as a gift to Kumayt. And one by one, the Banu Hashim, they put money in this cloth. The women of the Banu Hashim, they take out their jewelry and they put their jewelry in this cloth. Eventually, all this money is gathered, and it amounts to a huge amount of money. Um, yeah, 100,000 dirhams, 100,000 silver coins is gathered, and they come and they say, this person comes to Kumayt and he says, "Oh Kumayt, this is just a little bit that we are giving you. Please accept it." And again, he refuses to accept it. I just want to show how much the Ahlul Bayt and how much the Banu Hashim appreciated those people who took that effort to defend them, to spread their message. And really, it's something to ponder upon, that was this message just an akhlaqi message, or was there this deep, dangerous political message there that was the reason why it was very dangerous for Kuwait to do it? Definitely, there was that political aspect, how remembering Imam Hussain would unite the Shia as a community against these oppressive leaders who were in power at that time. And it would remind the Shia that the goal of the Imam was always to establish an Islamic government. And it had that dangerous political message that till now continues. If we look in the last 100 years in the country of Iran, Raza Shah was somebody who forbade and cracked down upon the mourning of Imam al-Hussein in Iran. Why did he do that? Because he saw the danger of the message of Imam Hussein and he was scared of it. Anyways, with that, inshallah, let us return now to some of the statements of Imam Hussein. Bear with me, we'll go through a few more of them, and inshallah, then we'll wrap this up with some final concluding points. So, again, before Imam Hussein alayhi salam leaves the city of Mecca, he writes letters. So, at this point, he has essentially began his uprising. He has refused to pledge allegiance to Yazid, and slowly news is spreading across the Muslim Ummah that he has taken this stance and he's beginning an uprising. So what does he do? One of the things he does that maybe we haven't heard on the mimbers too much is that he writes letters to the noble men, to about 5 people who are mentioned in the books of history. He writes them letters inviting them to come and join him. Some of them, they really try to join him. Some of them do join him. Some of them betray him and they go to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad and they show him this letter. So there's different reactions. But the letter is the following letter that he wrote, the same letter to different leaders in Basra. Part of the letter, he says the following: وَقَدْ بَعَثْتُ رَسُولِي إِلَيْكُمْ بِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ, that, O noble men of Basra, I have sent my messenger to you with this letter. What do I ask you to do? وَأَنَا أَدْعُوكُمْ إِلَى كِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَسُنَّةِ نَبِيِّهِ صلى الله عليه وآله. I am inviting you to the book of Allah. I'm inviting you to the sunnah of his prophet, Allah's prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because in this society before us where Yazid is in power, what has happened? فإن السنة قد أميتت. The sunnah has been killed, has been destroyed. وإن البدعة قد أحيت. And innovations, bid'ah, things that are not there in the religion, have crept up, have been brought to life. And if you listen to me, what will happen? وَإِن تَسْمَعُوا قَوْلِي وَتُطِيعُوا أَمْرِي أَهْدِكُمْ سَبِيلَ الرَّشَادِ. If you listen to me, if you make me to be your leader, I will guide you to the right path. So again, through these statements, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get an understanding of what Imam Hussein was doing. What was he inviting people towards? What was he embarking upon? Again, a very interesting story is at the end of the life of Muslim bin Aqil. So after the people of Kufa had betrayed him, after he had fought for a long time, when he was given a promise of security by Muhammad bin Ash'ath, and then he was taken to the castle of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, and then Ubaidullah is about to kill him now. There's a conversation, this is from the book Al-Luhuf. There's a conversation that ensues between Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad la'natullahi alayh, and Muslim. So Ubaidullah, he's asking Muslim that why did you come to Kufa? He says, أخبرني يا مسلم بماذا أتيت هذا البلد وأمرهم ملتئم. Look at his cunning way of trying to deceive people and trick people about the reality. Ubaidullah says, "O Muslim, we were all united. Life was going well. Why did you have to come here? Why did you come here? فَشَتَّتَّ أَمْرَهُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ. You cause division amongst the people. This is what you, Ahlul Bayt, do. You just cause division. Why is it that you came here? وَفَرَّقْتَ كَلِمَتَهُمْ. So what does Muslim say? This messenger of Imam Hussein, this person of who Imam Hussein trusts very strongly, this person who has been reared amongst the Ahlul Bayt, who knows the mission of the Ahlul Bayt, who knows the mission of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, what does he say? What is his response? He says, "Ma li hadha ataytu." No, I didn't come to just cause division the way you're saying. ولكنكم أظهرتم المنكر ودفنتم المعروف وتأمرتم على الناس بغير رضا منهم وحملتموهم على غير ما أمركم الله به. He said, it is you, O Banu Umayyah, O Ubaidullah bin Ziyad. You are somebody who caused evil in society. You uplifted evil. You buried that which is good. You ruled over the people. You imposed yourself on the people when they didn't want you. You force them to do things that is not what Allah commanded us to do. وَعَمِلْتُمْ فِيهِمْ بِأَعْمَالِ كِسْرَى وَقَيْصَرَ. This is actually not in the English below. That you acted in a way that those Caesars and those pharaohs used to act. So what did I do? What did we, the Ahlul Bayt, do in response? فَأَتَيْنَاهُمْ لِنَأْمُرَ فِيهِمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَنْهَى عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَنَدْعُوَهُمْ إِلَى حُكْمِ الْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ وَكُنَّا أَهْلًا لِذَلِكَ. كُنَّا شبي وَكُنَّا أَهْلٌ لِذَلِكَ. He says that we came to invite people to the ma'roof, to invite people to the good, to forbid the evil, to call people to the hukum, the government, the rule of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah. And we are the ones who are worthy. We, the Ahlul Bayt, are the ones who are worthy of doing this, of leading in this way. Again, we're getting an idea of the goal of Imam Hussein. And the last quotation we want to look at, inshallah, is the following, and then we will leave it at that. This is the same one that I had put in the blurb of this course, and we kind of mentioned it at the end of the last session as well. This is now on the way to Karbala when Imam al-Hussein is stopped by the army of Hur, and Imam al-Hussein addresses them after they pray together, and Hur shows that respect for Imam al-Hussein. He says, "No, you lead namaz, and we will pray behind you." Perhaps it was that respect that he had to the Ahlul Bayt that eventually saved him, peace be upon him. Anyways, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he addresses the army of Hur and he says the following, Inna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. After he begins his khutbah, after the prayers, Inshallah, I'll address the question that was just asked afterwards as much as I can. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he addresses the army of four and he says, verily the Prophet, he himself is quoting a hadith. The grandson of the Prophet, Imam Hussein, is quoting a hadith of his grandfather. من رأى سلطانا جائرا مستحلا لحرم الله, that somebody who sees an oppressive king, what is the quality of this oppressive king? What defines this oppression? O Hussein, we want to know what you think of justice. What is your criteria of justice? He says the definition of this oppressive king, this oppressive sultan, is the following. مُسْتَحِلًّا لِحُرُمِ اللَّهِ, somebody who considers or makes the haram of Allah to be halal. نَاكِثًا لِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ, somebody who uh, breaks the covenant of Allah. مُخَالِفًا لِسُنَّةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, somebody who goes against the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. يَعْمَلُ فِي عِبَادِ اللَّهِ بِالْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ, somebody who acts amongst the servants of Allah, he acts with oppression, with injustice, with sin. In response to such a leader, if somebody is quiet and they don't do anything, فَلَمْ يُغَيِّرْ عَلَيْهِ بِفِعْلٍ وَلَا قَوْلٍ, they don't do anything, they don't say anything, they don't take any action against such a leader, كَانَ حَقًّا عَلَى اللَّهِ أَنْ يُدْخِلَهُ مَدْخَلَهُ. This is a very, very powerful statement, really something to think about. Imam Hussein alayhi salam is quoting the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, saying that if somebody is quiet in the face of such a leader, such an oppressive leader, then it behooves Allah to punish this quiet individual with the same punishment as that oppressive leader. What is Imam Hussein doing? Imam Hussein is telling the army of Hur, these people of Kufa, some of them are those same people probably who wrote letters to him, and now because they are scared of Ubaidullah, they are scared of Banu Umayyah, they are now in an army against him. He's telling them that what I am doing has an Islamic justification behind it. What I am doing is in line with the teachings of the Prophet. It is not the case as the Banu Umayyah tried to convince people that أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولِ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ, that verse of the Quran, that you have to obey the Ulil Amr, means that you have to obey an oppressive caliph. No, that is not the correct understanding of that verse. The correct understanding of Islam is that we have to stand up against oppression. And the definition of oppression is an Islamic definition, where somebody who disobeys the rule of Allah is an oppressor. So this is a very, very important. This one hadith sums up this course of ours, that we want to know what is Imam Hussein's definition of justice. We can see it right here in this one statement. Anyways, he goes on to say, "Ala wa inna ha'ula qad lazimu." He's saying these Banu Umayyah, they are obeying shaitan. They have left aside the obedience of Allah. Basically, I have begun this uprising against them for this reason. And so I think based on all these statements, we have inshallah got a good idea of what Imam Hussein was doing. He had launched a political and to an extent a military movement against the Banu Umayyah to establish the rule of Allah on this earth. And here one very important question arises that let me actually just quickly summarize. So this is now we've reached the end of our course. This is our final slide. We see some of the statements that if we want to take some of the common statements that were repeated in a lot of these hadith that we covered today, we saw this idea of amra bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar, that Imam Hussein was enjoining that which is good and forbidding that which is evil, of course in an Islamic definition of good and evil. He was calling people to the book of Allah, to the sunnah of the Prophet. He was calling people to obeying that which is halal, and he was standing up against those people who had changed the definition of halal and haram. So through these kind of statements, we have got an idea of what Imam Hussein was calling towards. And if we say that he represented justice, as definitely he did, we know what kind of justice he meant. We know what was his definition of justice. It was this definition that is, for example, in line with the Book of Allah, in line with halal and haram. And so, one very important question that arises now, I'll answer that question, inshallah, as much as possible, and then go to the question that Sayyid Ali Raza Ja'fari has asked on the chat. Is that if we say that Imam Hussain alayhi salam's goal was to establish an Islamic government, then don't we have to now conclude that he failed, God forbid? No, of course not. Nobody says the fact that we remember him after all these centuries itself shows that his message has remained. His message has become more and more powerful, in fact, and changed the course of history. But that doesn't mean that his goal was just to become a shaheed and that's it. No, that's a wrong understanding. His goal was not just to commit suicide or to die as a shaheed, nor was his goal, his only goal, to establish an Islamic government. Both are somehow an incorrect understanding. But there's no doubt that what he did was he embarked upon a course of action that would have resulted in one of two things. That uprising that he took against Yazid could only have had one of two consequences. Either he would have been killed, which is what happened, or he would have won and he would have overthrown Yazid, and he was ready for that. He was planning for that. Overthrow Yazid, establish an Islamic government the way his father had ruled. He would have taken over and been the leader. Of course, in one way, one of the reasons, one of the justifications we can say that why is it that he's not seen as a failure is that, in a sense, maybe he knew that he wasn't going to win. It wasn't that difficult for somebody who looked at the history of the people of Kufa to know that there was a very high chance they would have betrayed him and he wouldn't have been successful. But he knew that the time was ripe for me to launch this uprising. People are ready, people are asking me to do something. And he also knew that Yazid was not as cunning as his father Muawiyah, such that his blood, if it was shed, would have remained. His message would have remained forever, and it would have had that result. Remember, he said in that letter, in that will that we read earlier today, إِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي. Okay, he wouldn't be able to himself establish an Islamic government and bring about that Islah, but his blood in the long term would have that effect of waking people up and showing people where is truth and where is falsehood. And in that sense, he reached his goal of, really bringing about an Islah and changing the course of history forever. So maybe that is one understanding we can say, that why did he begin his uprising if he knew he was going to be killed? But and that inshallah also answers this question that Sayyid Ali Reza Ja'fari asked, that did he know Muslim would be killed? It is likely that he probably knew that the people of Kufa are not to be trusted. They had betrayed his brother before him. They had betrayed his father before him. Time and again, people came to Imam Hussein and they told him, "Oh Hussein, don't go to Kufa. Just stay in Makkah. Go to Yaman. Run away. You'll be killed if you go to Kufa. The people of Kufa are not to be trusted." But he knew what he had to do. He saw that, no, it is my responsibility to stand up and do something against this deviation that has occurred in the Muslim Ummah. Even if it is dangerous, even if there is a high likelihood I'm going to be killed, still it is my responsibility to do this. How did Muslim and his children separate when in Kufa? I guess that his children were not with him from the beginning. When he went to Kufa, he went to Kufa alone. He left Imam Hussein in Medina, or Makkah rather, and he went to Kufa. Anyways, inshallah, again, we ended a bit early. I guess I'm not good at estimating how long these classes are going to take. Let me just conclude with this last point, that, there are many, many lessons that we can take out of the tragedy of Karbala. We can see lessons in loyalty. We can see lessons in love. We can see lessons in patience. We can see lessons in keeping that relationship with Allah through dua and dhikr. That Imam Hussein, even on the night of Ashura, him and his companions, peace be upon them, they engaged in that remembrance of Allah and worship. The story of Karbala is full of many different beautiful lessons that, if only we look at it with that understanding, we can inshallah change our life for the better. But one of the main, if not the main lesson that we can take out of Karbala is this. And so if we want to see what does it mean to be a follower of Imam Hussain, if we want to follow in the footsteps of Imam Hussain and be Husayni, we have to understand that primary lesson of what Imam Hussain alayhi salam represented. And that was that when he saw deviation and injustice in his society, he didn't stand back and just let it happen. He took a stance, a dangerous stance. Of course, he knew with his wisdom what he had to do. And I'm not saying that his course of action is the only course of action that always has to be taken. Of course not. Other Imams, in their circumstances, even he himself, prior to the death of Muawiyah, his stance was different. He didn't begin this uprising. But what he represents forever is this, that when the time is ripe, we have to take a stance against injustice. We have to stand up and establish the rule of Allah and try to have the laws of Allah implemented in society. That is the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. With that, inshallah, again, I would like to thank you, dear brothers and sisters, for bearing with me, and I hope, inshallah, it was useful to go through these beautiful hadith and learn something. May Allah accept it from us, and may Allah always keep us upon the path of Imam Hussein. Allow us to read his beautiful statements as the statements of all of the Ahlul Bayt and learn from them and implement them and live by them and benefit from them in this world and the hereafter. We pray that Allah Ta'ala hastens the appearance of our 12th Imam and gives us the opportunity to be from his supporters and friends. Again, I'll stick around if anybody has any questions, anybody wants to introduce themselves. It would be my pleasure to get to know you more. Many of these names I'm not familiar with, and maybe I don't know you. So I'm around. One more question here. Feel free to go, those who are in a rush. The class is now done. No need to stay. One of the questions that Sayyid Ali Raza Ja'fari asked is that I heard he had two sons who were hung and killed. Maybe you can clarify if possible. So this is a point of debate amongst historians, that the story of the two sons, Muhammad and Ibrahim, who were killed after Karbala. They were jailed for 1 year in Kufa, and then there's a long and detailed, very, very detailed story of what transpired and how they were killed. Let me just tell you the following, that this has been narrated from Sheikh Saduq, one of our eminent scholars of hadith. But Sheikh Abbas Qummi, when he brings this very lengthy narration of the sons of Muslim and how they were killed, at the end of it, he says that in my humble opinion, I don't think that this narration with all these details can be true. But I am narrating it just out of respect for Sheikh Saduq and his chain of narrators, that this story of the sons of Muslim and how they were killed, honestly, the story is bizarre. Like the level of detail it goes into and the things that happen, it doesn't seem to be logical that that could have happened. And also, there is a debate whether those two boys who were killed were even the sons of Muslim. In another narration, they were not the sons of Muslim, they were other boys from the Banu Hashim. Anyways, but there is this story there. No problem.